I was recruited for the project in August 2018. I just completed my 20th year in the military, 15th in Special Forces, and for the first time was considering leaving. Lost friends along the way, and the last of my family had just passed. Felt like it was time. I never had how I was feeling, and I think people understood. The 12th of August 2018, I received a message from my group commander telling me to be ready for a private video call at exactly 1 p.m. with no further information. This in itself was unusual, and the identity of the caller made it more so. Not every day you hear from a retired Rear Admiral and former head of NSWC. It was a short conversation. Best of my recollection, it went as follows. And by the way, I've changed all the names below for obvious reasons. Admiral, sure. Matthew, been a long time. Condolences on your recent loss. How are you holding up? Well, as can be expected, sir. Good to hear that. Now time is a factor here. So let's get straight to it. I've heard you might be leaving us, and in your position, I can't blame you. A lot of lucrative offers out there for a man of your talents. I believe I may have one that will suit you. To be honest, I didn't know what to say to this, and in my experience, this wasn't how things were done. But he continued. I was contacted this morning by someone I respect, former ODNI, to ask if I had a suitable candidate for a team he is heading. To be clear, this is an SAP with a blank check, and when we ran through our conjunctions with some of our private contractors and assets, you were the obvious choice. No family, I thought, have out of the door already. So if you're interested, I'll pass you through to another call with the project leads. Give these men your consideration. Son, this is a unique opportunity to serve your country and be well rewarded. I cannot deny I was intrigued, as much as I'd been toying with the prospect of civilian life. It wasn't a comfortable feeling. I'll admit it scared me a little. The fear of being without purpose. At least that's how I imagined it at the time. Yes or no, Matthew? Yes, sir. Wise decision. In that case, my involvement ends and this discussion never took place. Understood? Understood, sir. He nodded to me and the screen went blank. My connection was routed to a platform I did not recognize. In the following minutes, I received download requests for some heavy-duty encryption and security software. Once they completed, a fresh call screen opened. There were two others present but no video or ID. Their audio carried a mild distortion, like some form of voice masking. The conversation only lasted 2 minutes. They gave me a brief overview of the project and what would be required of me. Dates and time. Officially, we would be employed by a private entity, as there could be no paper trail. No traceable association to any branch of government. Plausible deniability in case of catastrophic intelligence leak. The pay was more than adequate, and my immediate charge would be facilitated. What wasn't discussed were any details of the operation. They simply told me I'd be briefed on site. The call ended and one of those new security programs kicked in, cleaning itself and any trace of the last 15 minutes from my system. And that was how it began for me. I worked within this section purview for the next 4 years till I accepted the truth. We all know there are crimes committed in the name of our country, all manner of evils concealed by those in power. And my own silence was a part of that. As long as I kept their secrets, I was as guilty as they were. So I decided to tell my story. I've literally lost everything because of that choice. But I won't stop. I'll post the truth wherever I can until they find me. There's an old quote which stuck with me through the years, spoken 9 centuries ago by the King of Jerusalem. I think of it damn near every night. Words rising up in the quiet moments, as I drive through the night watching my mirror for a tale, as I give another false neigh at another cheap motel, as I sleep alone in the woods with a gun in my hand. I find myself whispering a prayer and a mantra and a curse. When you stand before God, you cannot say, but I was told by others to do. This or that virtue was not convenient at the time. This will not suffice. Indeed, it will not. So here we are. If you're hoping for scientific and technical detail on what I saw, sorry, I'm not the guy for that. I'm no PhD and all relevant intelligence was on a need-to-know basis. Compartmentalization is key to security. There are thousands of people all over the US who have worked on beyond top-secret projects and never had any idea what they were a part of. In the most basic scenario, I think of it like this. You need someone to drive a truck. Doesn't mean you need to know what is in it. Even the information I did learn of the project and its history were limited. I received some general scene setting and early briefings and picked up the rest over time. To the best of my knowledge, the site was discovered through irregularities on standard seismic scans. Some bright spark matched the coordinates with recorded satellite interference, then took a field to check it out. What they discovered worked its way up the ladder until someone senior enough made the decision to lock it down and bury everyone involved in NDAs. The land surrounding the anomaly was brought up through private third parties, and a mining concern created its cover. In August 15, I took a flight out of San Diego, arriving for pickup around 3 hours later. After 2 decades of traveling overseas, this was a genuine pleasure. I was collected by another ex-Special Forces operative. Let's call him Mark. We drove 8 hours, from city to suburb to empty plain, arriving in the mountains after dark. Mark wasn't much of a talker, but neither was I, so we got along just fine. After an hour of winding through Moonlight Forest, we reached our destination at exactly 2 a.m. Mark had a key code for the first gate, a vehicle-sized entrance and high perimeter fence. The road took us to a complex of buildings nestled on the mountainside. We were met there by 2 armed guards who escorted us from then on. They led us inside one of the larger structures and pointed out where our living quarters were located, then took us down a narrow set of stairs to a cold and empty basement. There were steel double doors built into the wall, maybe 20 feet wide, which accessed the interior of the mountain itself. We entered what had once been a natural cave network, now enlarged and extended through the recent excavation. A single powerful lit strip ran down the center of the ceiling, and there were cameras at every corner. It was a 5-minute walk through those stone passages before we reached the final checkpoint. This door was airtight, 6-inch thick steel, and must have weighed the better part of a ton. And on the other side was the project control center. It was a relatively basic setup, one equipment tower with computer stations on either side, a generator and several stacks of containers. And on the opposite side of this area, I saw a second airtight steel door. There were only 3 people present. First was a tall, thin male in his 50s, who introduced himself as Adam, which is obviously the on-site lead, as I also suspected that this would be one of the men that spoke with me over the video call. And next, we had Joanna, an intelligence analyst, an agency license. And lastly, we had Luke, who would be part of the security detail with Mark and myself. There were never many people present. In fact, I rarely saw more than half a dozen at any one time. The remaining 3 members of the team arrived in the next hour, and our initial briefing took place shortly after. Adam called everyone together and we introduced ourselves. I'd be leading the security team, and when there were no comms with base, just assume overall command. Mark and Luke completed my squad. John, a gray-haired physicist, would lead the science team. Peter was a geologist and the youngest of the group at 36. Ave was the third, a biologist with a deep South accent. Regards the team's numbers, in particular the 3-3 split, that was a concern. As far as I had been led to believe this was primarily a military operation, I had no idea what we would be facing, so didn't want civilians on the first trip down. I was overruled. Adam never said it aloud, but we were clearly under serious time pressure. I literally didn't discover why until several years later. The next morning, Joanna took us through to see the object which had brought us all day. The anomaly, she called it. Not gonna lie, there wasn't much to look at. Not at first. It occupied the center of another excavated room, surrounded by an array of monitoring equipment. From a distance, I thought it was just a hole in the floor, nothing more than a tunnel with oddly colored sides. But on approach, I realized it was actually separate from the rock, a pale tube 15 feet in diameter, rigidly extending a few inches out from the stone encasing it. The material which formed it possessed a faint luminescence, a milky light which swelled or shrank in each passing moment. Despite this, when I stared down inside, I found the interior plunged rapidly into total darkness. At the mouth, there was also a mild disturbance in the air, tiny waves of heat and humidity which buffeted my skin. The surface of the tunnel appeared to be in constant motion, reflecting and distorting any light which fell on it. The on-site team referred to this structure as biofilm. Though they never successfully acquired a sample to confirm its nature, it was only 2 inches at its thickest point, yet penetrating it in any way had proven impossible. Nothing was able to pierce the surface. Pneumatic drills, graphene blades, and even an infrared solid-state laser all failed. Force or radiation of any kind was almost instantly dissipated throughout the biofilm. The only measurable effect of any of these tests was a temporary increase in luminescence. And as for the interior, they tried sending drones down in early July. Both units were lost to electromagnetic interference in the first 50 feet, dropping lifeless into the dark like pennies in a well. To be fair to the team involved, there was no fucking around on the third attempt. They lowered a heavily reinforced and insulated instrument platform on steel wire cabling, the kind of unit that could survive a volcano or the ocean floor. That worked better until they ran out of cable at 2 miles. Then the next attempt came, and it was 7 miles this time. The readings these units returned were unusual to say the least. Inside the tunnel, there were no variation in temperature, humidity, or atmospheric pressure. None whatsoever. 32.3 degrees Celsius and humid as a rain of force every inch on the way down to 7 miles. Now, just for comparison, the land outside the caves overaged 12 degrees that month and dust dry. The air inside the tunnel was also tested for airborne toxins and other trace materials. This result was even stranger, as there was nothing detected, not so much as a microbe, was if the atmosphere inside remained completely sterilized, despite being open to the air. And on August 10th, the sensor platform was lowered for a third time. This attempt halted at 9 miles, and they had found something this time. To be continued.